Good morning. I would like to begin this by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of the meeting will be available to view on the meeting page of the Council website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I'd ask all members of the board who have a video camera to keep their video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and keep their microphone muted except when invited to speak. Officers will of course join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. And if you could use the Zoom facilities to use the raise hand function, that will make it easier and more secure for me to actually pick up who wants to speak. As I was saying ahead of the meeting, I'd ask for your patience if we do run into technical problems. And should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, if I possibly can, or else someone will do that on my behalf. And the public broadcast will be paused. If it's not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. I'd like to start, if I may, with a roll call to establish who is present. When I call out your name, please confirm by unmuting and stating that you are present. So Val?
Yes.
Martin?
Yep, present.
Barry?
Yes, here.
Councillor King?
Yes, just arrived. Sorry to be a little late, Chair.
No problem, Simon. Good to see you. And Councillor Slatter is still having IT problems?
Yes.
Okay, and myself, Councillor Dennis Payne, I'm here. And Rhiannon, would you, we have no apologies at this point for absence?
No, just the note from Councillor Slatter to say she's having problems getting.
And does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Martin?
Sorry, yes. I don't think I do, but the Pensions Committee has been declaring whether they are deferred members of the scheme or active members. I didn't think we had to declare that, do we?
Rhiannon, can you give us an opinion on that?
No, I don't think so. That would be right.
Certainly, Chair, some time ago, the advice I got was that we didn't have to declare that.
Thank you very much, Simon.
That's cool. Sorry, Chair, that's correct. If it's on the declaration of interest form, it's not necessary to declare it in the meeting.
Thank you very much. So no other declarations, then I'd like to move on to the minutes of the meeting of the 2nd of July. As to whether those are a correct record. Would anybody who, if any members have questions regarding them, would they use the raise hand function on the right of on the screen to show that? And if it relates to a confidential item, we'll take those at the end of the meeting. Martin.
So just a minor point on section 6, risk monitoring report, page 5. It says individual members raised the following issues. The third one, it's just the phrasing. It says, suggested that in the risk register overhaul, red risks are given additional controls in order that they may become amber. I think what we're saying is that additional controls need to be recorded to reflect that they are amber, but it kind of sounds as though we're just writing in a few extra controls so that they're not red anymore. And I don't think that's what we said.
Thank you. Any comments from officers on that?
I would concur with Martin entirely. That's I don't know. I can't remember the fine detail of the discussion, but that what he has described would be entirely inappropriate. So, yes, it does need to be reworded.
Chair, that's my memory as well. So I also agree with Martin.
Thank you, Councillor King.
I'll note the change in the minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Councillor Slatter. Welcome.
Apologies, Rhiannon had to send me a magic link. Thank you very much, Rhiannon.
Not a problem.
Thank you. Are there any further issues? Sorry, Val.
Yes, thank you very much, Dennis. On the same page as what Martin was referring to, slightly higher up in respect of the risk monitoring report, it says an overall of the risk register was on the pension fund agenda plan. I had a look on this this year and this month, and it seems that it doesn't necessarily say the overhaul of the risk register was on the agenda plan. It's more about the risk strategy being reviewed. Is that the same thing?
Mark, do you have anything on that?
You're still on mute, Mark.
It's sorry, it's been on the action log, not on the agenda plan. I'm not sure if there's some confusing. So at the last meeting, the outstanding action was for officers to receive some information from Martin, which we have now received. And then we were going to obviously determine after that what would happen in terms of the risk register. I think Joe will touch on that in the action log. But so I think it's just was misworded on the minutes, to be frank.
Because probably the minutes could just be amended again, please.
I can note that in these minutes, yeah.
So it should just, so it just should reflect it was on the action log.
Thank you. So anything else on those minutes? So we are being asked to approve the minutes, and with no further comments on that basis, the recommendation to approve the minutes is carried. I will sign a hard copy when I next meet in person. Okay, so we mentioned there the action log, and an updated log has been included in the papers. Are there any questions, or Mark, or do you wish to add anything to this log?
Sorry, Joe normally takes us through the log. Joe, do you want to add anything, or shall I say something?
No, I think every action is completed from the 2nd of July meeting. So yeah, nothing further to add to that, really.
Okay, thank you very much. No members have indicated they wish to speak, so I will take the log as noted. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. You may have said this at the beginning, but if we're asked to vote, how do you wish us to do it? Is it the thumbs up?
If we do have an actual vote, it will be individual roll call.
But all of the agenda, most of the agenda items today are for noting. So yeah.
Yes, so it's more a matter of noting by thumb up, but not to worry.
Well, I'll take it basically by affirmation, and if I get anything against, then we'll look at it. So the minutes of the Pensions Committee on the 30th September are presented to us for information. Does anybody have any questions on those minutes? Right. Councillor Sutter.
I would have just said under 17, well done. Simply, really.
Yep. Thank you very much. If there are no other matters, I will take those minutes as noted. And then we have a forward agenda plan. If any members have questions on that, would you raise your hand? Martin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this was, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the year, but the internal audit report that was discussed at the Pensions Committee, I was led to believe that that was going to be presented to the board at this board meeting, but it isn't. I think it should be noted at the next board meeting. I think the internal audit report actually addresses administration matters and therefore should be noted by the board. So I think we should note it at the next meeting. If we can't note it at this meeting, I suspect not everybody's necessarily seen a copy. But also as a matter of principle, I do think it should really be a kind of standing item. Every time there's an internal audit on the pensions group, I think that report should come to the board.
Mark.
That seems perfectly reasonable, and we can accommodate that. So if you wish, we can obviously get the last internal audit report to the next meeting, no problem at all. We are just trying to determine when the internal audit for this year will take place, because I'm not sure if you're aware, there are some repatriation of services going on, what were formerly LGSS. So I believe, and that does include Cambridge's internal audit. So we're still trying to work out when they're going to do the next internal audit. But certainly the last one we can bring to the meeting. And I think also, actually, perhaps with Val, we probably need to have an offline discussion around the comments you made around the internal audit report, which will obviously fairly detailed. So we can obviously set that up as well.
Thank you, Mark. Val? You're muted.
Following on from what Mark was saying about a meeting, I think actually I'd quite like the meeting to include probably Martin and yourself and anyone else of the committee, because I think some of the points I raise actually are really for probably a committee decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Well, I mean, a board decision. Sorry.
Yeah, I think my thinking is that we hone it down to what the critical matters are and then bring them back to the board. But I think, in terms of the level of detail, it would take up at least half of an LPB to go through that, I would say. So I think absolutely things would need to come back to the board for decision. But I think what we need to do is to cut through to what the actual critical areas are and then deal with those through the board.
Oh, Mark, I wasn't thinking that the committee as a part of a board committee. Sorry, I wasn't thinking the board members are part of a board meeting were going to talk about it. I was thinking that would be offline.
Fine. And I'm more than happy to be involved in that. Martin, would you be as well?
Yes. Finally found the mute button.
Great, thank you. Mark, can I leave that to you to arrange?
Well, you can, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other matters on the forward agenda plan?
Dennis, Chair, I raised my hand because I suggest that I think I support Val's suggestion, but I think the invitation should be extended to all board members, and anyone who wishes to attend can, but obviously it's not obligatory. Can I suggest that instead?
I'm happy with that. I would guess that we may only get the first three mentioned actually attending, but if the meeting is open and remote, then let's do it like that.
I personally, I wouldn't mind attending, Chair, if it's at a time that I can make. So thank you.
Okay, Councillor Satter.
Yes, I possibly didn't fully understand the use of the word offline on that, because I thought that was going to be an exchange of emails was referred to. If it is something that I can join in on, I gladly would if I'm invited.
Okay. You have started something here, Val. It's going to be a board meeting that isn't a board meeting by the looks of it, but that's fine.
Can I just say, I would like to apologise to Simon and Councillor Slatter. I didn't mean to not include them. I just thought maybe, being we'd had some emails between Martin, yourself and me, they were probably the three to include.
Let's not worry about it.
Can I suggest, Chair, that rather than an exchange of emails, it's perhaps better to have a virtual informal meeting about this?
Simon, I do believe that was what we were expecting to do.
Yeah, sorry, it's my fault, Chairman, for using the word offline. I simply meant outside of the board. So it's simply creating capacity to talk this through in some detail, effectively. So we'll try to set up something which is convenient for all board members, and whoever wants to attend obviously can. And then in advance, I guess Val will share the document you produced. Would that be okay? Yeah. Okay. But we'll give people enough time to read that through in advance, of course.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, anything else on the agenda plan? No. Okay, thank you then. On that basis, we will take that agenda plan as noted with that one additional item to come forward to January's meeting.
Sorry, Chairman, you did want something in the first meeting of the new year, didn't you, around communications and digital? We were about the sorry, to be clear, it was around the success or otherwise of the consultation on the responsible investment policy and how we could improve that.
Thank you, Mark. I had taken the item which said Cambridgeshire Pension Fund engagement.
Oh, sorry, it's been added since I last saw it. I do apologise.
No problem, no problem. And that's one for Corey, so thank you. We discussed the communications policy, which you had convinced me there was as we intended, so that's fine. So I had nothing else for that. So I will take that as noted, and move on to the administration report, and I believe Joe Kent will be presenting that item. Joe, are you happy to do that from where you are?
Hi, Councillor Payne. Yes, I am. I'm on my phone, so I won't switch the camera on because it won't be a very flattering angle. But I'm hoping to be able to join properly in between my next reports. So, yeah, the administration report for the period, just run through the items within it. Section 2, the key performance indicators for the pension service. This covers the period 1st of June to the 30th of September. And the table of information can be found in Appendix 1 on page 27 and 28. You'll notice this reporting period, we have a fair number of red and amber statuses on this report. And as the report explains in section 2, we had a few unfortunate incidents in the reporting period, with a couple of days of complete system outage where we weren't able to access the network. That had a quite significant impact on the activities where we have a turnaround time of 5 working days. And then that in turn had an impact on some of the other, what we would say, lesser priority areas, such as the payment of pension benefits from deferred status. Payment of benefits from active employment is always going to be our priority due to continuation of income. So that's had a knock-on effect on that. We've also had a bit of a run of incidents with members of staff being ill with either COVID-related sickness, and we've had a bit of flu instances as well. And of course, during this reporting period, it was a summer period, so annual leave was higher than it would normally be in a normal 4-month period. All those have had a bit of a knock-on effect on our performance indicators. We've had some delays, some system issues with the network as well, in terms of responsiveness of the administration system. That's also slowed people down in terms of producing work. So that again has had a bit of a knock-on, but that problem has now been fully resolved. So hopefully there won't be a repeat of performance that we've seen over the last couple of months. Moving on in the report to section 3, receipt of employee and employer contributions as detailed in Appendix 2. As you'll see on page 31, during the period April to July, we slipped below the run of 100% receipt on time. That was back in place for August. Hopefully going forward that can return, but 99.2 to 99.8 is still fairly good. So that's not presenting too much of a problem for us. Next section of the report is breaches of the law. And this reporting period was the period of time in the scheme year where we have to produce pension savings statements, which represents members' annual allowance issues and annual benefit statements. And we had a number of breaches that we don't deem to be reportable to the pensions regulator, sorry. So we had one instance where we had 2 employees in the fund fail to submit information for the pension savings statements to be issued by the deadline of 6th of October. That affected 4 members of the scheme. We wrote to these members to let them know that there would be a delay in receiving this information. And the other breach was where for 0.9% of annual benefit statements were not issued by the deadline of 31st of August, again due to delays in receiving information from the scheme employer. But all annual benefit statements have now been issued, so that's covered. The next section is the internal dispute resolution procedure. A number of items on there, as you can see. I don't tend to discuss them in too much detail, but they're all under control. The one due on the 6th of November, we're still working on, but we're agreeing an extension to respond by a week on that one. But yet nothing I want to say any further than what's written in the report, but happy to take any questions on the report.
Councillor Slatter.
Thank you. You acknowledge later in your papers the newness of some of your members. So my first question is on 3.2, and that is simply, how many employers are we dealing with? What does this percentage actually mean? It obviously is a good percentage, but I just wanted to get a handle on that. And as I don't always have somebody to ask, where would I find that information? If somebody said, how many employers are there? What does this percentage mean?
Okay. The annual report and statement of accounts has a listing of all the employers in the scheme. I'm wondering, Corey, don't suppose you know off the top of your head how many active employers we've got in the Cambridgeshire Fund?
It's above 200 is what I would say there. Depending on whether you count individual schools as employers, it can go up to 500 or so in terms of the payrolls that we're dealing with. So the pension contributions, though we've got roughly 200 employers, it's many more pay points that we're collecting from.
About 200 is fine, and I do understand there's some bulk ones there. Thank you. And the other thing was, and I do apologise if you've just said it, Joe, because your brain is working quicker than mine on these subjects. In 5.3, we were waiting on delays from the Ombudsman, considerable delays. What sort of money are we talking about there? Is this a serious thing? Is it reaching the time when you write it off as a bad debt? How does that work?
So I'm just reminding myself of the case.
5.3.
Yeah, I think what's happened here with an overpayment. Well, we do have an overpayment of pension policy. I'm not sure if you've seen it. It certainly hasn't been to the committee or the board for quite a while as a revised policy. So generally, we do tend to go to all to the most appropriate extent to see whether we will recover or write off an overpayment. Depending on the value of it as well, because obviously if an overpayment is only £300, it won't be worth officer time or anybody else's time to try and recover that. But we do have an extensive policy on what circumstances are that we will pursue recovery and those that we won't.
So without breaching confidentiality, we assume then that if you are pursuing it, it's worth pursuing.
Yes.
And I will find that in the policy when I look carefully.
Yeah, I shall send it to you. So
that's very decent of you. I do appreciate the assistance. Thank you.
Could I just,
and then congratulations on number 7.
If I could just come in on that one, because I think because obviously in order for something to go to the Ombudsman, it's going through stage 1 and stage 2 of the adjudication process beforehand. And so at each stage, we're making a decision as to whether it's, what is the appropriate action, because obviously each stage has a cost built in. I'm the stage 1 adjudicator, but there's a thorough investigation of the case in order for it to do that. So we like to resolve things informally before that if we can. And then if it goes to stage 2, well, that's the monitoring officer of the county council, and they will no doubt get probably Pathfinder law involved in it as well. So each stage has a cost, and we have to be aware of that as well.
Thank you. I'm rather assuming that these things are done well, but I feel it's also part of my job on the board to just check or ask the question. I'm quite prepared to look ignorant, but I do want to be sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry?
Yeah, I've got a couple of points. So I understand these things are out of your hands, but 2.4, the IT issues. I just wanted to ask a general point, have lessons been learned?
Joe, I'm happy to answer that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was rather interesting because you're probably aware, Barry, actually, that our pension server is hosted externally by our software supplier, which means we can access that outside of the corporate network. In fact, we can access it in a variety of ways, but it does still have like two separate processes for logging in. So we had access to the data, but we didn't have certain key documents, for example, that assist with the processing of pensions. And so what we're actually looking at as part of the business continuity planning work is pathways to our information and how we can move it so we can actually, even if we haven't got access to the corporate network, we can still do activities that we perhaps couldn't have before. And I think the Microsoft Teams has been really helpful on that in terms of the ability to store documents on that and access them outside of the network. But interestingly, the obviously the key point in all of this is you've got also still got to be completely secure in what you do. Getting an easy path to access things is not enough. You also have to, maintain the right degree of security as well. So yeah. So
my second point, 5.2, the second from the bottom case. It's just more a suggestion. So as part of my day job, I deal with blue badge applications, and it's just a suggestion that maybe if somebody's terminally ill, I know with blue badges that there's like a priority for if they've got a form called a DS 1500 form, which, sad to say, it's basically somebody who's probably got less than 6 months to live. But it just means that we pull out all the stops and they get their blue badge as soon within a fortnight. Whether consider something like that to, stop these IDRP issues.
Mary, on this one, there was the one sentence summary probably doesn't do this one justice. This involved the employer going down the ill health route.
Right.
Over the Christmas period, which slowed things down, and then other events speeded up, if you can imagine what I'm saying there. So it was an unfortunate incident all round with the members' representative pursuing this going forward. So there was multiple departments involved, put it that way.
Right, okay, yeah, it was just a general suggestion to obviously part of my role is to assist.
Yeah, we do absolutely anything which is of that nature. We absolutely prioritise. But we, as you appreciate, when there's employee and authority decisions and admin authority decisions involved in any process, it does create problems. I was going to actually say there's quite a few in section 5.2. I think in a sense, the Cambridgeshire Fund has been a bit unlucky that most of the IDRPs that we've had actually have been relating to Cambridgeshire Fund. We've only got 2 in the same period for Northamptonshire, and the processes are absolutely identical. So there are more than I would normally want to see, but I don't think it's any sort of systemic problem or endemic problem, because in Northamptonshire, as I say, we've only got a couple in the same period. I thought it was worth mentioning that because you probably see quite a long list there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. It's certainly a longer list than we've seen before. Martin.
Thank you. First, can I just echo Councillor Slatter's comment? Congratulations on the customer service excellence standard. Just going back, I think Barry's kind of covered the section 2 points. I too kind of feel that, we have the red, amber, green so that we can determine whether we should be concerned. And I think when you get several months in a row that are red, I am concerned. And certainly when when September comes out, there's a lot of, amber and red. There might be mitigating circumstances, but it would be good to understand how they'll be dealt with. And the BCP is a good place to go for. But I suppose I would kind of expect us to be able to cope with a few days of computer problems and still be able to at least keep to an amber. So, I'll be watching that one quite closely going forward, and I suppose everyone else will. On point 3, receipt of employee and employer contributions. They're not significant. It's nice to see them there. It does appear that there are repeat offenders again. The reason I tend to focus on that quite heavily is because you put it as your number one risk, and therefore presumably it is a major issue to keep an eye on. There was a mention in section 3.15 in the business plan about Pricewaterhouse doing a report on employer covenants, and that was expected to be ready around about October. Is that ready? Can anyone tell me whether it highlighted any particular contracts that were of concern?
Chairman, I can answer that if that's okay.
Thank you. Please do.
That report was received just earlier this week, and I'm in the process of reviewing the results of that at the moment. At a high level, what I can say is we had across the 20 to 30 employers that we looked at closely, there is a quite clear bell curve there. So we had 6 employers that came up in the high risk category, 6 employers in the very low risk category, with everybody else in the middle. So there are 6 employers that I'm planning to look at more closely and start to have conversations with them. What I would say is it doesn't seem to be an affordability of contributions in all of those circumstances being the item of risk. So there will be different issues that I'm picking up with different employers when I have those conversations.
Okay. Thank you. And then just, if I may, Chair, just on section 5.2, we've had some mention of some of these already, but when I look at the KPIs are largely, they're set by the committee, they're reported in the annual reports. I expect them to be fairly high level kind of KPIs. But the thing is, I often find myself wondering what the level of service is that we're providing to the members. How often are we making a mistake in the report that they're being sent? How often are we providing information so late that it would affect a member's decision about their pension and other considerations that they take into account? And I don't feel that I necessarily have that information. So, for example, the 4th item on 5.2, a lump sum was paid into another member's account. Sounds very drastic. If it was extreme, it may just be something minor, maybe a joint account as opposed to a single account, which might be considered relatively minor. But that's not really the point. The point is that the only reason I knew about that was because it was put forward to the head of pensions as essentially a dispute was raised over it. Now, I'm sure you must have some kind of measures which measure the level of that member service before it gets to the dispute level. And I was wondering if it would be possible for you to consider whether you could add, not necessarily in that list of the committee's KPIs, but maybe just add a KPI that would give us some indication of that service level to members.
I think that one's for you, Mark, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have, look, so if we go back to, in terms of what I see as the head of pensions, we obviously have probably getting on for 100,000 transactions a year with members, just to put a scale on it. So because obviously every active member gets an annual benefit statement, every deferred member gets an annual benefit statement, obviously every pensioner members getting transactions every single month, and that's before we get to the hard bit, which is actually dealing with the new members, the exiting members, the people with transactions in year. So there are literally tens of thousands of transactions going through each year, and the number of complaints that don't reach dispute is actually really, really low. There was a period when it was worse, which was around, it was actually around the turn of the year when the exit cap came in, which actually created a lot of problems with the administration, and we went through quite a rough patch of a few months, and that did generate a few complaints. So I would see a few informal complaints coming through. So we have complaints and compliments. We have we also have behind the scenes, we have obviously indicators to look at things. For example, when something comes in, how many days it takes, or how many hours it takes for it to get into a workflow process. Because you can imagine we get most of our indicators can only start from the point the actual workflow process starts. But what I think is really important is, does the inquiry get put into a workflow process within good time? So we've got behind the scenes reporting, we've got part process reporting as well. So you're seeing almost like the highlights of key processes, but what we've got is beyond that. I guess I just don't see a lot of informal complaints coming through now, which gives me confidence. We'll have to have a think about what we can provide to give you that reassurance as well. So I'll take that away and see what we can produce to deal with that.
Thank you. I mean, even just initially, without making it too objective and having to put numbers to it, just a statement to that effect, of the stuff that comes across your desk, is there a large proportion that you're dealing with before it gets to dispute, or is it normal? Yeah. So don't overwork it for my benefit.
Yeah, I'll use my operations man at Actar, who is the one who would obviously be dealing on a database with a lot of that. But as I say, anecdotally, I think we did have we had more complaints than I was happy with, and going back, let's say about 11 months now. But I am quite. So I mean, for example. Certain services cause quite a few problems, as you can probably imagine, for chief executives and directors. The message from the Section 151 officer for both Cambridgeshire and for Northamptonshire is they hardly hear anything about pensions. So, I mean, that probably tells you a story. But we'll, as I say, we'll produce something for you to give you confidence.
Mark, did you want to comment on the deferred membership status issues you've been fighting?
So with
the sequence of 4 red.
Yes. So you may recall, but this wasn't actually a KPI. So we introduced this as a KPI fairly recently. Relevant to the rest, which have been around for years, because we increasingly deferreds into payment were a increasing in volume, and therefore felt like an important part of the activity. Joe kind of touched on it in the sense that in terms of pay-in benefits, they are behind in the queue from ones where there are clear continuity of income issues, or indeed dealing with deaths and survivors benefits. But when we put the 90% target in place, I thought that was a perfectly achievable target. I mean, a whole host of things have happened over that period. At certain points in time, teams probably had a quarter of their members actually being able to work, and then had system issues added in as well. So there were reasons, but I think Martin's right to say, he's going to keep a close eye on it and would expect it to improve. So would I.
Thank you. Barry.
Just a more formatting point. So that Appendix 1, there's like so the second and the third point, there are keys against the SLA targets. So this is 1 and 2, but I can't actually see. I know it's mentioned in the main body of the report, but there's no explanation of those keys.
No, that's it, Barry. Actually, I asked for the footnotes to be removed and for the content to be put in the main body, because I thought it's so important. It was front and center. But we just simply forgot. We removed the comments at the bottom, but forgot to remove the 1 and 2. Apologies.
Okay.
Thank you. And can I just check with members that we would formally like to minute our congratulations on 7.1? I'll take that as an affirmation if the number of members, yep. Okay, thank you very much. Val, you have point?
Yes, page 27, Appendix 1. Couple of question. The targets range between sort of 90% and 95%. How do you determine what your targets actually are? Because I noticed your latest one about the pension benefits from deferred membership actually was taken at 90%. Why was that not, say, 95%? How do you determine what your target is?
We looked at what else was out there in terms of what other funds did, but I mean, I think really when you're looking at things like dealing with deceased members and retirements where there's continuity of income, you're looking at the higher percentage, and then something a bit below that for the other areas, but with the potential view that if we can get up to 90%, we could look to increase it. I mean, remember that was the first draft of that KPI, and we were not hitting that at all when we first started, but with the ambition to bring it up to 90. If we can maintain 90, then I'd be happy to look at moving it, and increasing it higher, if that works. But it was around continuity of income and how vital it is that it's on time. Does that answer the question?
Not really. It's really about how do you actually determine what your target is? How do you select that particular figure?
I'm sure I really don't understand. I thought that's exactly the question I just answered.
I think.
So if it's around paying a pension, where the person is leaving one day and needs their income the next, or dealing with a deceased member, then we would want it as close to 100% as possible. But there's absolutely no point in me putting 100% on something, because we're just going to fail. So 95 is from an industry perspective, is sort of like the sweet spot. And for other slightly lower priority, but still, of course, really important, you would have something which is slightly below that, which is 90. But there's no more science to it than that.
Okay. Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. I believe we have more than thoroughly noted and challenged that report. So I will move on. Thank you very much. Mark, the business plan update is the next item. Can I ask you to present that? Thank you.
Of course, Chairman. Sorry, I hope my voice holds up during this.
You and me both.
The first activities are around procurements. The one thing I would flag around that is some of our high value retenders, for example, the reappointment of Mercer to the investment consultancy, there has been a slight change in process when it comes to sealing the contracts, which has created some delays which we've not encountered before. In short, if the value is if the contract needs sealing due to value, there's certain attestation clauses that need to be dealt with, which is effectively getting really senior individuals at the supplier end to sign it off. So we've encountered that with the Mercer one, which meant we just had to have a slight extension. So we're just finalising that now, but that's something we'll build into our procurement timelines going forward. Now we're aware of those changes. So we've headline news is we've reappointed Mercer and we've reappointed Northern Trust through a sort of a pool level call off, Northern Trust being our custodian. Moving on to the business continuity planning and the cyber resilience we'll touch on later. Business continuity planning, I have managed to obtain a new template for West Northamptonshire Council. which is actually a vastly improved business continuity template from the one that LGSS had, where it looks at sort of a range of scenarios like loss of staff, loss of IT, loss of premises, and I've done the first draft of populating all the key areas, and that's being reviewed by my senior officers at the moment. We'll then complete the template, and then we'll obviously bring that through for consideration for board and committee. And it's obviously, as you know, in a strange sort of way, having that loss of IT for a few days has actually helped some of the thinking, as has the fuel crisis, because that was another one of the scenarios that we looked at as well. But there are clearly some links with that with regards to the cyber resilience work as well, because some of the loss could be due to cyber attack or something of that nature. But yeah, we'll bring. We have now been able to move that forward considerably from where we were, and that will come to the board in future. I won't mention cyber. We'll touch on that later. Moving down the report, the guaranteed minimum pension, which you've been hearing about for a long time, so 3.9. We had a tool to upload data into our system that has now been completed. In the new year, we've scheduled to do some work to finalise that activity. So we've been able to release so we've not had to renew the tool for a further year because we've completed work on that from a loading data into the system perspective. The other one, and I'll pause after this one to see if there's any questions so far, the Mcleod age discrimination remedy. So this is where younger members were not protected in the same way as older members when the new scheme came in 2014. Obviously, in the future, the remedy itself will require looking at benefits, possibly changing and increasing the amount payable to certain people. And obviously also looking at all the records which are not yet in payment. But before that, we've had are having a data exchange with scheme employers. So at the moment, scheme employers are in a 2-month window to supply us with any missing data. And I would say that as a fund, we have always required employees to continue to provide data they always used to in the past. So we're hoping there won't be too much that needs updating, but we'll obviously see what comes in from those scheme employers. For the very large employers like the WNC payroll who pay Cambridgeshire County Council staff, that we've had some very detailed discussions with them about it well in advance of us sending through the template for the data. So they're kind of had some, because of their scale, have had some additional discussions with us. But we're expecting, with the ability to have a slight extension, we're expecting most of that data to be in by the end of January. I'll pause there to see if there are any questions on any of the activities up to that point.
Councillor Slater.
Yes, I had 310 down as something to query. I've been looked in on these forums that have been put our way as part of our training, and I was quite taken aback to find out just how little benefit people seems to be resulting from all this effort. And there's nothing we can do about it. Obviously, the law's the law. But I don't know whether Mark has any idea of just how much liability is involved in Cambridgeshire, but it seemed to be tiny amounts in other areas.
Yeah, it's
straining to give birth to a gnat when you've got so many other things to do.
Well, I mean, the truth is, I'm hoping that a lot of this will be system-led. So, when a benefit is run at the moment, it effectively works out what's the value of the benefits under both the old rules and the new rules. And obviously, if the old rules were higher and the person's protected, it would pay that higher benefit. So I'm hoping a lot of it will be system led, but inevitably there'll be some very niggly manual work required. But we're not expecting it to have material changes to the liabilities of the fund. And indeed, obviously, the actuary made an estimate at the last valuation, which didn't particularly tip the dial on contribution rates.
Thank you.
All right.
I just wanted to cover, we haven't mentioned it, gone beyond that point. 3.8, the obtaining the Pensions Administration Standard Association accreditation. I just wanted to ask just a general question: what actual benefit is that to members? Because I know back in the day, pensions used to go for awards, and a lot of effort was put into the awards, but I just wonder if it has any sort of material benefit to pension scheme members.
Joe, do you want to come in on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. This one is it's different to an award. Award only lasts 1 year, and you're in competition with other pension funds for that. This is a very specific pension standard, so it's a bit like the customer service excellence, but with more pensions thrown into it. So it seems that a lot of the big funds are undertaking it, such as Strathclyde Pension Fund and some other funds around the country. So it's on our list of things to do, but I think Mark would agree that if it distracts from other more important work, then we'll perhaps reschedule it to a later date.
Okay, that's basically what I wanted to ask, whether if there's too much focus on it and it's not actually detracting from doing the day job of paying benefits.
Well,
I was sort of following on from what Barry was saying, really. He said like governance functions are in line with those higher quality organisations. I just wonder who basically you were targeting, whether it's the likes of Capita and Diligenta and places like that, or whether you're ultimately looking to provide some sort of outsourcing business. I couldn't just sit, a bit like Barry, I struggle to see the benefit to sort of the members unless you had a longer strategic plan on this.
I think, we're certainly not looking to provide outsourced services. That wouldn't necessarily be the answer in the past. There was a quasi-commercial aspect to LGSS. Sorry, my voice is completely going now, actually. So it is about, will this generate improvements for our funds, and particularly the service to members, which is what's coming out of the CSE. So there's an improvement plan effectively every year, which we take an action plan and we take aspects of that and try to improve various aspects of service to members. So it would be for that reason, to improve what we do for the members of the fund. If it doesn't serve that purpose, having gone through a process, or indeed if the process looks too onerous, then we would knock it on the head. It has to serve a valuable purpose for our members.
Okay. Thank you.
thank you, Mark. Councillor Slatter.
Yes, just to save Mark's voice a bit, my other question could follow on from that, because it was based on 312, and that was the undecided leaver records. It may well be one that Joe can answer. And that is in 312.1. There's talk of a choice that has to be made by undecided leavers. And I was just wondering what the aggregation means, whether that is a sort of carry forward, and whether in fact whether our pension fund is attractive would mean that some people would stay with it rather than taking their money out and putting it somewhere else. So it may be linked to that, and maybe Joe can.
I'm happy to take that, Mark, if you. Okay, so if I sort of go back over a bit the background of this exercise, we have a fair amount of small of benefits that aren't actually benefits in the scheme, that where people have worked for a period of time that's not long enough to award them a deferred benefit. So these are refunds waiting to be paid to scheme members. However, if they've got benefits elsewhere in another LGPS scheme, then that may mean that benefit cannot be paid, or that that benefit should be transferred there. So what this exercise was to do was to clear a lot of the very small records that we have that ultimately hold no liability. And it was a bit of a nice to do bit of data cleansing, really, just so that we have less records on the system. Again, the system is cleaner on that basis. So we've been working through this, and the trouble with this process is members can leave without realizing they've got a benefit, and then they don't tell us that they've got an address or a refund, should I say, and they don't keep us up to date with any changes of address. So we have problems with keeping in touch with them and asking them to claim their benefits. In addition, the benefits can be really small, and the refund can be very small, and they also don't feel the need to claim it. The aggregation part was, it could be that a member has a period of service in the scheme already, and that next period of service could be combined with that. So there's lots of work involved in this. It's not simply just paying a refund. There's lots of around the sides kind of work to it. And as you'll see from the report, we've decided to put on hold this activity whilst we focus on other areas within the scheme that do need much more attention. So there's nothing wrong with us having lots of undecided leave records. Oh, I realised I've just been talking about a whole different subject. Sorry, but that was sorry.
You've explained that next one I had to anyway, so that's very useful.
Okay. So,
sorry, Mr. Chair.
So 3.12. Right, this is why we've shelved 3.13, is to focus on 3.12, if that makes better sense now. So processing undecided leave records, again, almost very similar. People can leave the scheme with a deferred benefit. And this is a very long story. So what we have found is that due to the way we get information from scheme employers, we have a backlog of undecided leavers. We get told monthly when people leave, and then the following month, we get told that they've rejoined the scheme. So we have a lot of work accumulating to sort these records out. So I might have to ask you what your specific question was again. Now I've completely thrown myself off.
Well, I was trying to be helpful in that it's to do with the attractiveness of our scheme, right, and whether we are encouraging people to stay with us in case they are going to be paid by a scheme that is part of our fund in the future, and whether that aggregate that you mentioned in there, whether that's a sort of carry forward, or whether people are choosing to pay into a private pension scheme and go independent, as it were. That's what I was saying. But what you've said was also useful, because it did also mean I had understood the later bit of the report, which is reassuring.
Okay. So, so when somebody leaves and they are entitled to a deferred benefit in the scheme, we have a period of time to notify them that they have a deferred benefit in the scheme, and also no statutory period of time to actually calculate those benefits. I mean, people will leave their benefits within the scheme because the LGPS is a good public sector pension scheme. Certainly, we don't see lots of people transfers out, as you can probably see from the admin report. It's quite a low volume of numbers that actually do transfer out. So the attractiveness of the scheme, I would like to think that members did understand how good the LGPS is, and the aggregation comment is that they could come back in several years' time and combine their benefits, depending on the length of time they've been away from the public sector. So yeah, that doesn't probably represent the numbers involved, which in section 3.12.3 of this report is the fact that we have to process a deferred benefit regardless of the member stays in the scheme or indeed transfers out. So it's a large, probably our largest volume area of work that we have. And going back to the point I was trying to make about sort of the volume and how we are kind of struggling, and we're not alone in this. This is happening across the country in all LGPS funds, trying to keep on top of calculating a deferred benefit as soon as it comes in. It's very, very difficult, and that has added to the reasons why we have this number outstanding at the moment. Obviously, we would prefer not to have the backlog that we do, but they're very difficult to process. There's lots of things you have to look at around the side. You can't just take information straight from the employer and press a button and it's done. It's a very time-consuming exercise because you do have to look whether there's benefits elsewhere, the age of the person, what benefit they're actually entitled to, whether the data we've received from the employer is actually correct and good enough to use. So all these things sort of come into it. But in terms of whether the member actually physically stays in the scheme with this deferred benefit is probably not really so much to do with if the scheme is good, but people just don't seem to transfer in great volumes, which probably does recognise how good the scheme is.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, given that your voice is...
I can give it a whirl.
I just would ask you to focus on the, as I'm sure you were going to anyway, on the key points.
Yes, I will do indeed. And yeah, I mean, that one's going in the wrong direction, but I think Joe's talked about some of the mitigating factors, and we have, just to give you an example, in the month between the end of August and September, we had in Cambridgeshire about 1,500 new leavers came in, and normally we'd expect in a month, let's say 500. And some of these are not, and the problem is some of these are not leavers. So we're actually doing quite a bit of work to improve the data quality around this and what we report to you. We've also had a blitz across the entire service to try to get some of these numbers down. I have agreed to increase the resources in the business as usual team. So I'm doing a lot in this area to try to improve this, as I'm hoping by the turn of the year we'll start seeing this go in the right direction. But if it doesn't, we will need to look at resources again, because it is quite a resource intensive area. Just moving down the report, you'll be aware of the multiple investment strategies. The committee decided not to pursue that based on the recommendation of officers and indeed advisors. I think if anyone saw the paper for the last committee, you'll realise why. It was of no material benefit to any one group, but might be of material benefit if the assets exceed liabilities by about 20% going forward. So if there's a 20% improvement in assets over liabilities, it will be worth potentially revisiting that, but not at this point in time. The employer covenant work Corey's mentioned. The asset pool we'll talk about in a later report. The RI policy, significant works has been clearly gone on this, as you're all aware. The December meeting will be looking at approving finally the RI policy, and to the ISCs, well, we're taking some detailed information. So it's worth looking at the ISC papers actually for the upcoming meeting, because it will look at some scenario modelling, the impact of the climate on our portfolio versus a sustainable portfolio, and some plans for the future. So we're doing some very practical work now on how we shift our portfolio into a more sustainable portfolio. And I think that's probably the last one I need to mention, and invite any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions on the remaining portion of that particular report? Fine, thank you very much indeed, everyone. We've been asked to note the business plan update, and I believe we have done with some challenge, so thank you. We're now moving on to item 7, the governance compliance report. Joe, can you present that?
Thank you.
Welcome to have your screen on. Well done.
Thank you. Okay, so this is the regular governance compliance report. It's very short this month because the there's not much going on in the world. So although there probably needs to be, particularly around areas like good governance review that's been conducted by the Scheme Advisory Board, that's gone very quiet. But I'll just run through the three items that are in this report very quickly. As you probably are aware, MHCLG, who are the ones responsible for the scheme regulations, have now changed their name to the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. It's a bit of a mouthful, so you'll probably hear me refer to it as the department going forward, because that's how the LGA are going to refer to them. So try and keep that a bit simple. The next part of the report is on the pension regulators' new code of practice. You would have heard about this before in previous reports, where we were expecting the TPR to release their final version of the new consolidated code of practice that was supposed to be released in November. Unfortunately, that has been delayed due to the number of consultation responses that they received on the draft. That's now not expected to at least spring or stroke summer next year. So the activity in the business plan on that one has been delayed accordingly. Once that's been released, we will have 6 months to make sure that the scheme and our administration and governance is still compliant with any changes that have been made to the code of practice. So once we see the final version, we'll get straight to work on that. The only other item in here that to discuss is the skills and knowledge opportunities. As you'll be aware, over the summer and finishing in September, Aon were running some skills and knowledge modules that were run online. And you've since been sent links to all of them to view at your leisure. Hopefully you've all received those emails, and if you haven't, let me know and I can get them resent to you. What we're asking all committee and board members, and will be covered in a later revised version of the skills and knowledge training policy, is for all committee and board members to undertake all of that training by the 31st of December, where possible. The emails from Aon do say that the links will be live and available until the 31st of March, but due to what we want to achieve within the strategy and the upcoming work on the valuation, we'd really appreciate it if members could complete that by the 31st of December. We do get detailed reports from Aon as to who's undertaken the training, so we're able to keep records this end. So we will be perhaps sending some emails of encouragement if anybody hasn't quite done it all yet, or by the 31st of December. So that's really all that's to say in that report. Hopefully there'll be a bit more at the next meeting in January. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Slatter.
Sorry, yes, me again. I think when it comes to members of the board not having the knowledge, we vary. I'm sure most of you are green, but I don't think I am. You may have been concerned by the extension, because I must admit I was one of the people who asked for an extension. It's more like we want to be able to listen to it again, because I certainly need more than one go at these sort of things. I come from such a low knowledge base, but those modules are excellent in my mind anyway. And as I say, it's very useful to be able to go back to them a second time. So honest Gov, we are doing our homework.
No, thank you. We appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Barry?
So the list of the Aon virtual, well, for me it was watching recordings because I couldn't attend live. The first event on the 21st of June, I don't remember ever being sent a link for that one. I definitely don't remember doing
that was one that wasn't part of the official series. That's one they did just for Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire.
Right.
I can see if the link is still available somewhere for that, and get it sent to you, Barry.
Yeah, just wanted to say the event in Bournemouth in January, I'm kind of interested in going in person.
Physically going?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
You could note that.
Yep. Okay, I'll sort that out for you.
If there are no other questions, I will. Sorry.
Dennis,
King.
Chair,
I'm sorry, your
my
hand my apologies, your hand is a bit difficult for me to see. I'll try harder.
That's okay, don't worry. I wasn't sure if the hand function was working or not.
Yes, it is. It's just a little dark.
Oh, great. Yeah. I think I was fortunate enough to be able to attend all of the Aon training events, and I thought they were very good. And yes, so I learned a lot from those. But I wanted to just ask, in terms of our training record, we don't have to worry about informing you about these events because, if I understand correctly, Joe, they tell you whether we have been there or not, don't they?
They do indeed, yes. Yep.
Oh, great. Okay, because I wonder if it would be helpful when you're, excuse me, compiling the training log to just identify which training we attend is communicated to you directly, because otherwise, you know, if we know which ones we have to let you know about, then that reduces your workload and ours.
Yeah.
If that's possible to do that.
That's fine. Yeah, this was a special series run by Aon where they were able and had the technology to tell us that you viewed it, and either in live or the recorded sessions. So we were lucky on this occasion. So yeah, we'll let you know.
That would be really helpful. Thanks very much, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm being asked to note the contents of the report. I believe we've done that. Can I move on then to the risk monitoring report? And can I just remind you that this is a formal review, so we will be asking for a vote at the end of this session, just to note that we on the review. So, Michelle, can I ask you to introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you. So, yeah, this is the standard risk monitoring report. On this particular occasion, there is just one actual change to the main risk register itself, and that's highlighted in section 2.1. So as you can see there, risk number 24, we're proposing to increase both the gross and residual score. And really this is just to highlight what we've seen in terms of recruitment over the last couple of months, if not longer, and just really to highlight that in some instances we're having to undertake a longer recruitment process in order to get people in place. So we felt that was worth noting on there. As you will also see in that section, a mitigation that we've added into that is that we're now utilising additional recruitment avenues just to broaden the horizon on that in terms of the people that we're targeting for those positions. So under section 2.3 is the standard short to medium term risks. We haven't highlighted or haven't identified any new short to medium term risks for this period, but what we have done is updated two of the risks that we've had on there for a while. And really this is in line with the reports that we've already seen on the KPIs and with the governance and compliance. So for example, on the pandemic, some of the cold and flu related illnesses have been a short-term risk to the fund in that respect. And again, on the knowledge and recruitment, that's been updated to show that all the training has been delivered now. And as Joe previously said, it's just a case now of getting that training up to date by the 31st of December. Obviously, what we'll do nearer that time is have a bit of a roll call of everybody that's undertaken the training and send gentle reminders out about that. And again, until all that training's undertaken, it does remain a risk to the fund. So those two have been just updated to reflect those issues as well. Just a short note on the actual format of the risk register itself. So what we're going to do going forward, to avoid any version control issues is keep the risk numbers exactly the same for every risk going forward. This means that on the executive summary page for this particular report, what we've done is you'll see added a risk position column, which shows the movements. This is just a temporary measure just for this meeting, just so we could get the report through the appropriate deadlines. What we want to do going forward is actually change this executive summary. So it's going to be a lot clearer to you about starting points and any movements that we've had in risks and any updates that we've made over the period. The intention will be then that the actual main body of the risk register stays the same in the same order, just for continuity and just to make sure that that is the standard that you'll see every time, with obviously just any changes put to that particular risk rather than actually moving around the risk register. But apart from that, I'm happy to take any comments on either what we're proposing to change on the risk register this time or the actual format of the executive summary itself. Thank you.
Councillor Slatter.
A quick typo, 2 questions, and one asking about whether it should be another risk on top of these. The number 14, we're missing a word. If this goes public, fortunately, it's nice and easy to change it on the website. I think it should be for quality information or something. Don't leave it to our imagination, that one, I think. Risk number 8, I think if the members becoming a target for fraudsters and criminals, we do have skills on dealing with scams, and I did wonder whether being a county type organisation, this is one that does cross over and get advice from the officers that deal with scams and might be particularly able to deal with that small number of perhaps the older ones like me who are trusting and innumerate might be caught out. Just wonder if that was a question. Do you want to do these one at a time or?
No, I mean, do complete. If you have got other questions, do.
Yeah. The other one was on 12. I am concerned that some of the smaller employers may well struggle with responsibilities and the office work, really, especially in these times. And they might be really good cleaners, but rubbish at the office stuff. I'm glad to see there's a helpline, and it was a question about, is the helpline well used? And is it publicised? Because that could make all the difference, I think, for a small business. And I don't like to think that some of the lower paid workers end up going out to a more of a small private and perhaps the slightly less good employer because of the problems of fulfilling the needs of this pension fund. That's a bit of an existential question, that one. And the final one is to do with sort of things that can trip us up in terms of power. We are so dependent now on online communication, such as this meeting, and thinking about people like Mark dealing with people in Cambridgeshire. Presumably, almost all of this is online. You're not zooming around the countryside now. You're not trying to meet face to face, but obviously that can be thrown by a technical glitch such as the one I had this morning. And I wonder if those sort of risks, which might be as simple as a power cut, whether that is actually just in with the Northampton County Council risk assessment. Do you have generators powering the machinery, that sort of thing? So are these sort of, is there a sort of safety net type of risk assessment insofar as there's anything one can do about it? I'm thinking particularly power cuts. I know you talked about petrol shortages earlier. That was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I will do my best to go through those, and then obviously Joe and Mark might chip in as well on some of the bigger issues. So the first point, obviously, yeah, absolutely, we'll have a look if there's a typo on there and get that updated and corrected. In terms of the scams training for members, it's something that we have been thinking about and looking into. I think we're aware that county councillors have certain training, officers at the moment are having certain training. So what we need to do going forward is come up with some training solutions that would be suitable for board members as a whole as well that aren't covered.
Excuse me, Michelle, I had in this case registered it wasn't me, it was members of the fund. And so I'm thinking about the pensioners, who might be me, but it's particularly those who are more likely to fall for a scam relating to the payments of their pension.
Michelle, I can come in there if you like.
I mean, it's helpful to me as a councillor because I deal with people who might have had a scam and I know who to turn to because they're in the county council. You see what I mean? You know, I know the name, it's Karen Reid sort of thing, but I wonder what it was generally for the pension fund.
Yeah. So in terms of for our pension members and our active members, actually, I'm talking with my communications officer at the moment about what we can do in this area. We've also met with one of the Unison reps in the Northamptonshire sphere that's on the local pension board over there to see what Unison do in this area as well, to see if we can have a bit of a learning exercise and take on some of their practices. In that sphere as well, we're talking about maybe running some joint presentations with the councils over there, Unison and ourselves, to do a bit of a session on scams, how to spot them, how to keep yourself safe. So depending on how those conversations progress, that is something we could certainly do in the Cambridgeshire sphere as well. So it's very much on our agenda. We are looking at it. One of the other things in that way as well, we're looking at ways we can make people trust our communications. So because we're sending more digital communications, how do they know they're genuine? How do they know the links we're sending to them aren't going to take them to a scam or put a virus on their computer? So it's something very much at the top of my mind at the moment that I am working through.
Thank you, Corey. So in terms of the systems issues and the technical issues that you raised, so it is a bit of a two-pronged approach, really. So risk number 16 on the register does cover our pension fund systems and the data that's held within those systems and everything that we can do that's within our control. We've listed there, but obviously we are reliant on other hosts and obviously West Northampton Council as well. So they will have their own risk register and approaches that they would take to those. So it's a bit of a joint effort in terms of the risk around the systems. And we've obviously got external platforms as well, such as Haywood's and things like that. So I think probably a bit later on under the cyber resilience, it might touch a bit more on those kind of reliances that we've got with others as well there.
Sorry, can I come in?
Yeah, of course you can.
We're doing a lot of work on the business continuity plan and the cyber strategy as well, which is a later item on the menu agenda. So yeah, we are very aware of those risks, but we're looking at them in much more detail within the business continuity plan and the cyber strategy.
Thank you. And then in terms of the small employer aspect, I think probably Corey will come in on this as well, but just as a kind of overarching, obviously all employers, whether small or large, have statutory obligations to meet. Corey and his team put a lot of effort into the communications and things such as the employer forums in order that they get as much help as possible. Corey's team also has a dedicated team and line where employers can get specialist help on situations if they need it. So although they are still bound by the same, I understand what you're saying, there might only be one or two employees, it could be a very small employer, but I think that we're covered by the level of support that we offer those small employers to make sure that they're able to understand what they need to do and meet their obligations. But Corey, I don't know if you want to say anything more about that.
Yeah, I will. We do have a number of training sessions that we do run for employers, and what we try to do in every quarter is pick up new employers that have come into the scheme, deliver employer responsibility training to them in particular, which goes through all of their responsibilities, how they do certain things, when they're expected. We've also just rolled out a new escalation process with employers and revamped our employer issues log, where officers, if they're coming across issues that they are having with employers where they're having to recalculate or things aren't being provided, we can pick up those trends as a team and then direct our interventions accordingly. At the employer forums that are coming up in the next couple of weeks, we are doing a session on exactly that kind of thing. What are the key responsibilities of employers? What do they need to do and when? What are the KPIs around those in the admin strategy, and what we do in terms of an escalation process? So we are engaging employers quite regularly on these kind of things, and we do monitor who those particular troublesome employers are and direct things as we need to. And what I would say is on the small employers, we do mostly seem to be okay with the majority of them because it is so few, they can get what they need to do done. There are a few maybe employers that are not traditional public service employers that we do need to intervene with, where they've only got 1 or 2 people. But as I say, we do keep up with them quite closely.
That's good. If you'll excuse me, Mr. Chairman, this is where I think I'm the only county councillor left on the line now, but I have to be a bit careful. I'm here as a board member and we're defending the pension fund, I realise, but also I think about people in their jobs and their own household incomes and the security of their. So I can be. Do tell me if I'm stepping out of line, Councillor Payne, in that side of it. I do realise I have to think in 2 different ways with my 2 roles.
I don't believe you are, but some of us are actually totally reliant, or almost totally reliant, upon the pension fund paying out each month. Barry.
It's just really, I probably jumped the gun a bit because obviously one of our few agenda items is about the cyber resilience policy. I do note that the pension regulator is now wanting funds to basically take responsibility for their own sort of cyber security and cyber threat. So what I'm saying is basically, I'm guessing in the future, there'll be another point on the controls saying that how we are basically looking at our own data flows, etc., to make sure that they're secure. So that's basically my point.
I think data flows is a key issue on the material later on cyber resilience. So I think there's a very thorough job being done there, but we'll leave that till then. Val, if there's anything else?
Yes, thank you very much, Dennis. Michelle, I've got a few points on the risk register. First of all, I'd like to say how much I like the idea of the risk position and your little arrows of whether the risks of, residual risks have gone up or they've gone down. I really like that. Thank you very much for that. On the first page, page 65, risk 18, there doesn't seem to be an objective aligned to that or the people responsible. I think it might just be a typo.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it looks like it might have been a typo and it's been copied across. I'll get that updated.
Okay. Then I've just got a few different ones here. Risk 3 speaks about the managers are required to report regularly on their compliance with ESG, with our ESG policy. I just wonder, a bit of clarity here, not necessarily an answer now. What is regular and who do they report to?
Mark, I don't know whether
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So literally every time we speak to them, and it will be reporting to, well, it can be reporting to the investment subcommittee if they see managers. It can certainly be reporting to officers. So we still have meetings quite regularly with managers outside of the pool, and the ESG is always a component of any discussion. And then also the investor user group at a pool level. So 2 times a month, there's a revolving succession of managers that come in and speak to that investor user group. So it's effectively, we tend to see 2 managers a session. And we give them sort of like a template as to what we want them to address in terms of material, and ESG is always a vital part of that. Going forward, of course, it'll be all about reporting as well beyond, very, very specific reporting in that area, so we can fulfill our obligations around climate related financial disclosures and things like that. So there's a whole load of different avenues basically, but I hope that gives you a flavour.
Thank you. I've got some more, Dennis, I'm afraid. Risk 7, it talks about the controls is membership of the LGA and membership of the Regional Joint Communications Group. Are these two controls providing you with details of new stuff that's coming out in order so you keep up to date?
I can come in there. Yes, they are. So those groups, one of them is a working group. So we work with the regional group to actually produce materials that have a commonality across the funds. So, for example, the templates of annual benefit statements are worked on together there. The newsletters that go out to members are worked on in bulk between those funds to share the costs and the effort of doing that. The LGA comms group is the one very much that we know of new things that are coming out. We have working groups on there for the benefit of the whole of the LGPS, and we are part of those groups working on things that are being done at the cutting edge effectively in the communication sphere. There's a work plan that's published on the LGPS regs website, so you can see what the communications group is working on, what's coming down the road, and the various avenues that we have going on. So yeah, it's a collection of finding out best practice from other funds and working together to make sure that there's good outcomes across the scheme.
Okay, so very, very powerful controls.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Risk 8 is the last bullet. It says members are encouraged to participate in skills and knowledge training. Is it really the members? Should it be committee, board and officers?
Yeah, I think that's probably this whole concept when we talk about members, whether we're talking about scheme members or board members. Yeah, I'll get the wording on that.
Okay, thanks. The next point actually covers quite a few of the risks. It also, a few of them mention business continuity plan is in place and reviewed at least annually. I just wonder, this control obviously isn't working as you'd really expect it to be at the moment. And I just wonder whether some of the residual risks need to be slightly higher, and this sort of same scenario works through all of the different risks actually in the register. Maybe need to consider those at all.
Yeah, Mark, I don't know what view of that.
So there is a business continuity plan in place. It's and it was reviewed in and around the pandemic. I mean, it's probably just over a year, to be fair, because we were expecting to do it again. So generally, it is reviewed annually at least. So I'm not sure. I mean, we've obviously, as I said, we've got the old LGSS business continuity plan template, which it currently is on, until such time as a new one is agreed. That is effectively our business continuity plan, so it does exist. So when you say it doesn't work, what aspect are you referring to? Sorry.
Okay, I go back to your business plan on 363. You say a corporate BCP template is now being acquired from West Northamptonshire Council and is in process of being completed to reflect the new arrangements within the aforementioned council. The complete overall is being taken as part of the review to look at the wide range of scenarios such as loss of premise and loss of IT. I suppose what I'm saying is, while that is still work in progress, is the current plan that you're using and mentioning in, say, this report, the risk register, actually fit for purpose in the new world?
It's it was a BCP which was accepted for a large organisation such as LGSS. It was last updated immediately before we locked down. So I had to do a quick review of the whole plan in advance of us moving to remote working. So that was when it was last reviewed. So it was an accepted form of a plan. What I believe is the new version is better. The bits which we're obviously, we've got new learning since then. So look, I'm not going to pretend it's the old one's what I want, because it's clearly not. But it does exist. Clearly has served a purpose over time, and got us through the pandemic as well. So I do accept that we will be better after we've completed the work on the new version.
Okay. So in the meantime, do the residual risks need to just be pushed a bit higher, the scorings, to reflect that that control is probably not as good as you would like it to be?
I can reflect on that. I did go through and didn't feel they needed to. But if there's any particular risks you think particularly that you feel are higher because of that, then obviously, please let us know.
Well, risk 23 is probably an example. 23. The residual risk number had actually gone down from the last time, saying to me there's actually less risk, but actually it's one of the controls is the business continuity plan. They didn't sort of align with each other. The two different scenarios, i.e. you risk on it, the residual total going down, and also the fact is the business continuity plan isn't exactly how you'd like it.
Yeah, I've made a note of that, so we can go away and have a look at that one and see if it needs changing. I suppose the other option would be whether we highlight it as a kind of more of a short-term risk and not actually change the risk register to say,
No, I think yeah. Sorry, if there is an increased risk until we complete work on the BCP, then it would be on the permanent register, obviously. Okay.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
And at the moment, that's the end. Thank you very much, Michelle and Mark, for those.
No problem.
Thank you, Val. Simon, did you have a...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do indeed. Just something about the risk register. I did have my hand up before, and unfortunately, I lost connection. So if this has been mentioned, I apologise. As part of the Aon training programme, we were offered a couple of cybercrime training sessions, which were led by 2 police officers. And I have to say, I thought they were really good because they didn't go over the top. They offered lots of good practical advice. And can I suggest that perhaps you contact them in order to put something together to circulate to our members? Because I think that would be really helpful, because most of these scams happen because people are just not mentally prepared for them. So I think doing something along those lines would be incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I'd agree with that. I did the first one of those sessions myself, and I actually found it really useful as well. So I'll see if I can take that up with Aon and see if we can get some of that training distributed if possible.
That would be terrific. Thanks very much indeed, Michelle.
I totally agree. I attended those and they were excellent. Are there any more points or issues on this one? So we're being asked to review, which I assume means that we're being asked at this point to approve the current state of the risk register. And I'll take that as a vote by affirmation. So if anybody does not agree with the approving it, then if you can raise a physical or digital hand.
Agreed, Dennis.
Thank you, Simon.
Agreed.
Right. Thank you. So I'm going to take that as approved, and we will move on. And Corey, we have the admissions body scheme employers and bulk transfers policy.
Yes, thank you.
You've been patiently waiting to have your moment, so
my 15 minutes. So yes, thank you, Kevin. This policy that I've brought to the board, it's for post scrutiny after being passed by the pension committee. It's a policy that falls out of our funding strategy statement and focuses particularly on how we will treat different types of employers when they enter and leave the scheme, as well as when we will now review contributions and sets out our policy on bulk transfers out of the scheme as well. So if an employer is moved to another fund, or if a big bulk of members move from a particular employer, it sets out the policies on that as well. The reason it's been updated this time is falling out of the updates to the funding strategy statement, which you'd have seen previously, following legislative changes which bring in some additional discretions for the administrative authority to review contribution rates between valuations if there's a material change to the circumstances of a particular employer, or if that employer requests that we have a look at their contribution rates. It also allows us to enter into formal arrangements for the repayment of a deficit if the employer leaves with a deficit they can't afford to pay immediately. These are all areas that have been looked at in the past by funds all across the scheme, and we've entered into these kind of arrangements informally because the regulations never prohibited it, it just didn't explicitly allow for it. So that's been corrected in the regulations, and there are now policies and processes that funds have to have in this area. So there shouldn't be anything new that you're seeing in terms of those policies, because it's falling out of the funding strategy statement and often refers back to that statement. But because it hasn't been updated for a number of years, we also took the opportunity to do some updates around the pension fund objectives, for example, to make sure the latest objectives are included in this policy, as well as updating some of our practical processes that have changed over the years, things like how we account for the cash flow of employers in the fund. So that, like, as I say, there shouldn't be anything particularly controversial or new here. It is stuff that we've been doing for a while. We're just formalizing some of these policies. There is a track change version and a clean version as appendices, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions on those.
Thank you, Corey. No hands up. Councillor Slatter.
Sorry, you didn't get away with that.
It seemed too good to be true.
I'll talk less in future ones, I hope. So you mentioned that this is actually procedural. Is it okay for me to email Corey if I have a question about this report? I won't pretend to have mastered it. And any other things that has his name on. I'm not sure just how answerable he is. He wasn't on the attendees list, you see. So I always feel the ones on the attendees list are fair game, but he's come in in disguise somehow.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you've got any questions, then I'm more than happy for you to contact me and get in touch. I do normally attend these meetings. I wasn't at the last one because I didn't have anything on the agenda, and that might be why I've dropped off the list this time.
Okay, right. Thank you very much.
Are there any? Val?
Sorry again. Corey, there's just one or two sort of typos in a couple of the sections. Section 2, there is a full stop and semicolon. So it's minor bits and bobs like that. I've just noticed. That's me only comments.
Okay. Oh yeah, I spot that one now. I can see that there. Actually.
And also, I think maybe page 9, section 432, there's full stops instead of semicolons in a list, whereas all the other sort of lists with bullets all have semicolons, just for continuity.
Yeah. Okay, I'll have a look at those. Thank you.
They're just minor. Thank you, Corey.
If there are no other questions, we're being asked to note the amendments to this policy, and I will take that again by affirmation rather than anything else? We're all okay with that, are we?
Agreed, Chair. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Fine, thank you very much. Now, Michelle, we're now moving on then to the training policy.
Yes, thank you. So I think it's fair to say that the training strategy has been on our radar for quite a while, for one that we wanted to provide a review on. It's been delayed up until this point, pending final guidance on the Good Governance Review and the Pension Regulator's Singular Code of Practice. However, it's got to the point now where we feel we've got enough information that's likely to come out of both of those to put this strategy to you, with the understanding that obviously if anything changes, once both of those are finalised, we can go back and tweak where necessary. So in the pack, we've provided the proposed strategy and a tracked version changes just for ease of reference in the appendix. And it's fair to say that, again, it's been based on the updated skills and knowledge framework as the core driver behind it. I think from the board's point of view, probably the main consideration starts from section 11 onwards. And we are proposing effectively to no longer use the credit system. And this is really for two main reasons. Firstly, we didn't think that the credit system necessarily covered off a wide range of knowledge. So for example, we'd set the target at 18 for each member, but it could be that particular members had most or all of their credits in one particular area, such as investments, for example, rather than kind of a wide variety of training being undertaken to achieve those credits. The second reason as well is we felt that some of the credit scoring was a little bit subjective. So it was getting quite hard to particular conferences, for example, you could have a 2-day conference or a 1-day conference with credits applied just for the time period, but actually that 1-day conference could have held twice as much valuable content as the 2-day conference, which could have had things that weren't necessarily aimed either for the board needs or for local government. So they were the two reasons that we kind of thought about coming away from that system. So in place, as you've heard of plenty of times before, and obviously as Joe's covered off in the governance and compliance, what we want to do is move it onto this compulsory matrix-based sit for skills and knowledge modules, really to ensure that everybody has got a wide range of knowledge from the onset, and also just to make sure that there's a consistent message going out on all of this training as well. Again, before under the old system, members were learning different things at different times from possibly different sources, and therefore some of the messaging might have been a bit different. So we feel that this core training is a real way of getting that consistency across the board and committees. So in addition to the core training, there will also be this supplementary training that we offered previously and will continue to offer through the governance and compliance. So any external training that we feel that would be relevant to you in your roles, we would of course continue to do that. We will also continue to host additional training as key topics come up. So such as evaluation, for example, we've got some training that CORE is working on in terms of the valuation that we will deliver at a suitable time. I think it's February next year, but just to make sure that that continuum of training happens and remains relevant as well. In addition, once it comes up to the appropriate times for some of this training material to be reviewed, it'll continuously be reviewed and then offered as refreshers as time goes on as well. As with previous, we will continue to monitor the engagement of the training, and the chair will be updated with that progress just to ensure that he's happy with the training that's been undertaken to date, and obviously give any nudges if any are required. And again, it will also be recorded, as it already is, in the annual report. We do recognise as well there's probably a bit of a balance to be had with virtual and face-to-face training. Virtual training obviously being the most convenient training for most people to attend, but we do appreciate that some people do prefer face-to-face, and also for the social aspect of you working together as a board and that type of thing. So we will be aiming to get a bit of a balance in there as well of the delivery of the training that we offer. So that's really, in a nutshell, the proposed changes to the strategy. But obviously I'm happy to take any further suggestions or any comments you may have on it.
Barry, can I let you
Yeah,
talk?
just
comment?
yeah. I just thank you, Chair. So Michelle, you mentioned basically we're going away from the credit system. Page 157 and page 167. So I'll look at page 157 where the track changes are. 16.2, you actually talk about providing the credits to the chair, but obviously we're going away from credits, so that shouldn't really be in there.
Okay, I'll look at that. Yeah, it's probably just the information to the chair that needs to
Yeah.
so thank you. Yeah.
Is that all, Barry? Thank you. Any other questions on this? Michelle, can I ask one thing? You mooted then that there might be training on valuation coming up in February. Even if those matters aren't formally cast in concrete or anything else, it would be useful, I think, for members of the board to actually be conscious that those things were coming up. So we won't hold you to them totally, but if you can at least give us an indication of what further training is coming up, that I think might be appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have a word with Corey and see where we are with the planning of that and get something sent out to you, unless you know already, Corey.
I can confirm now, Michelle, yeah, we are planning on February for that training to go ahead because we're timing it just before the March committee meetings where committee members will be expected to make decisions based on the valuation. So the training will cover general background of the valuation for those that are new to it, what committee members need to know to make their decisions, and then they'll have those decisions brought to them in March. So February is very crucial for it to go ahead.
Right, thank you. Val?
Obviously we're all busy people. If we can't make some of the training, is any of this training being recorded so we can actually catch up with it, you know, sort of a day or two later?
Yeah, I want everything recorded from now on. So yeah,
Brilliant.
absolutely, yeah. And I think the valuation training, as I understand it, there will be a precursor training, which is effectively the Hyman's equivalent of what Aon have done on the valuation. So they want effectively the training will be for both board and committee, but they want sort of that grounding, but the Hyman's version as a prerequisite for them viewing or watching the more detailed scheme specific stuff that Hyman's will do in the main training module. But yeah, we've literally been talking about this in the last few days. So we've been trying to plan all the various activities that need to come to various committees next year around the valuation, and then the most suitable time to put in training, because obviously there's not huge amounts of capacity within committee meetings themselves.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, what I'd like to do again is we're being asked to review this. Is everybody in favour of this, the revisions to the training strategy?
I just ask, has this been approved by the Pension Fund Committee as suggested in 3.1? I was getting a bit confused as to our responsibility.
Yeah, no, do you know what? I was just thinking that when we came to that bit, I should have said sorry. So yeah, once these comments will then go to the Pension Committee in December, and then combined, that will then get hopefully approved at that point. So it will be a joint strategy between the two.
So it's the committee who will have the final say, but we're just
giving your comments first, and I'll feed those back to the committee.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just needed that.
No, that's fine. Val?
Michelle, I'm afraid I've got several typos, but I'll just drop them in an email to you. There's not that. There's a few.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
If they're typos, putting them in a mail would be a great way of doing that. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'm going to take this, that we're in favour of this, to go to the board, sorry, committee. Thank you. Right. We're now moving on to items for which it's necessary to exclude the press and public. So do members agree to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the reports contain exempt information under paragraph 1 and 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed in discussion, as it contains information relating to individual and financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. So I will take that by affirmation that we are going to exclude press and public, and therefore the recording, the